folding laundry, as if she was commenting on the weather. I don't think this marriage is working. Just like that. No build-up, no dramatic pause, nothing. She didn't even look up from the basket of clothes she was sorting through with that same dismissive attitude she'd perfected over the past 2 years. I was sitting at the kitchen table, finishing up some paperwork, when those words hit the air. Any normal husband might have dropped his pen, started asking questions, maybe even begged for an explanation. Not me. I looked up at her, took a moment to really process what she'd just said, and then did something she clearly wasn't expecting. I nodded. Finally, we agree on something. The look on her face was priceless. Pure shock mixed with confusion, like she'd just watched someone agree that water is wet, but somehow found it surprising. She stopped folding that shirt she was holding and stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice suddenly lacking that casual confidence she'd had just seconds before. "Exactly what I said. This marriage isn't working. You're absolutely right." I closed the folder I was working on and gave her my full attention for what felt like the first time in months. "I've been thinking the same thing for a while now." She opened her mouth and then closed it again. This wasn't going according to whatever script she had in her head. I could practically see the gears turning as she tried to figure out her next move. "But, don't you want to try to fix it?" she asked, and there it was. The expected response she was fishing for. The desperate plea, the promise to change, the emotional breakdown that would put her back in control of the narrative. Fix what exactly? I leaned back in my chair, genuinely curious about her answer. The constant criticism? The way you talk to me like I'm some kind of inconvenience in your life? Or maybe the part where you dismiss everything I say before I even finish saying it. Her face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Anger, defensiveness, then something that looked almost like panic when she realized I wasn't playing the role she'd cast me in. "You're being dramatic," she said, defaulting to her usual tactic of making me feel like my concerns were invalid. "Am I? Last week you told me I was embarrassing you in front of your friends because I laughed too loud at dinner. 3 days ago, you said my choice in movies was juvenile and refused to watch anything I picked. Yesterday, you rolled your eyes when I mentioned wanting to visit my brother next month. I counted off on my fingers like I was listing groceries. Should I keep going? Or do you get the picture?" The silence that followed was different from our usual uncomfortable silences. This one had weight to it, like the air right before a storm breaks. "I didn't mean," she started, but I held up a hand. "No, you meant it. All of it. And you know what? That's fine. People grow apart, priorities change, whatever. But here's what's going to happen next." I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through my contacts. "I'm going to call my lawyer first thing Monday morning." Her eyes went wide. "Your lawyer? You can't be serious." "Dead serious. In fact, let me save us both some time." I found the number I was looking for and hit call, putting it on speaker. It went straight to voicemail, which was perfect. "Hi, this is for Attorney Williams. This is calling about starting divorce proceedings. I'll need to schedule a consultation as soon as possible. My wife and I have mutually agreed that our marriage isn't working, so I'd like to get the ball rolling. Please call me back Monday morning." I hung up and looked at her. There. Problem solved. She was staring at me like I'd just announced I was moving to Mars. You didn't even give me a chance to explain what I meant." "Explain what?" "You said the marriage isn't working." I agreed. "What's to explain?" I stood up and stretched, feeling lighter than I had in months. "Unless you're saying you didn't mean what you said? Because that would mean you were just trying to manipulate me into some kind of emotional reaction." The way her face changed told me everything I needed to know. "Bingo. That's not." I wasn't. She stammered, and for the first time in our entire relationship, she was the one scrambling for words. "Look, I'll make this easy for you. You're right. This marriage isn't working. It hasn't been working for a long time, and we both know it. The difference is, I'm not interested in pretending otherwise anymore." I picked up my keys from the counter. "I'm going to grab dinner somewhere. When I get back, I'll start moving my stuff into the guest room. We can figure out the details like adults." "Where are you going?" The question came out sharper than she probably intended. "Does it matter? We just established we're getting divorced." I paused at the door and turned back to her. "But hey, at least now you won't have to worry about being embarrassed by me anymore." The drive to the restaurant gave me time to think, and honestly, I felt better than I had in years. No more walking on eggshells, no more second-guessing every word that came out of my mouth. No more pretending that constant criticism was normal in a marriage. My phone buzzed with 3 texts from her while I was ordering. I didn't even bother reading them. Whatever she had to say now, she'd had 2 years to say it when it might have mattered. The irony was that she'd probably expected tears, pleading, maybe even anger. What she got was agreement and action. Quick, decisive action that left her scrambling to figure out how to regain control of a situation she'd just lost completely. By the time I got home with my takeout, she was pacing in the living room like a caged animal. The laundry basket was exactly where she'd left it, clothes still half folded, which told me she'd spent the entire time I was gone trying to process what had just happened. "We need to talk," she said as soon as I walked through the door. "No, we don't." I headed straight for the kitchen. "We talked. You said the marriage isn't working." I agreed. End of conversation. But I didn't mean we should get divorced. I stopped and looked at her. Really looked at her. "Then what exactly did you mean?" And there it was again. That moment where she realized she didn't have a good answer because the truth was, she'd been trying to manipulate me, and it had backfired spectacularly. "I meant, maybe we could work on things," she said weakly. "Work on what? You've spent 2 years telling me everything I do wrong. You've made it clear that I'm not the husband you want. So why would you want to work on keeping something that doesn't work?" I opened my food container and grabbed a fork. "Face it, you got exactly what you asked for." Monday morning came faster than she expected, but not faster than I was ready for. While she was still in bed, probably hoping this was all some kind of bad dream, I was already on my second cup of coffee and my third phone call. Attorney Williams had called back at 8 sharp, and by 8:30, I had an appointment scheduled for that afternoon. The house hunting had started even earlier. I'd been scrolling through listings since 6 a.m., and by the time she dragged herself downstairs in her robe, looking like she'd barely slept, I already had 3 properties lined up to view. "You're up early," she said, trying to sound casual, but failing miserably. "Productive morning," I replied without looking up from my laptop. "Found a few places that look promising. Should have something locked down by the end of the week." Her coffee mug stopped halfway to her lips. "Places. Houses. You know, the thing people live in when they're not married anymore." I scrolled to the next listing. "This one's got a nice workshop in the garage. Always wanted to get back into woodworking." She sat down across from me with that careful, measured movement people use when they're trying not to appear desperate. "Don't you think you're moving a little fast?" "Fast?" I finally looked up at her. "You declared our marriage dead on Saturday. It's Monday. If anything, I'd say I'm being efficient." "I didn't declare it dead. I said it wasn't working. Same outcome, different words." I turned the laptop screen toward her. "What do you think of this one? 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, nice yard. Asking price is well within my budget." The way her face went pale told me she was starting to understand that this wasn't some elaborate bluff designed to get her attention. This was real, and it was happening with or without her input. "Your budget?" she asked, and there was something sharp in her voice now. "My budget. My house. My fresh start." I closed the laptop and stood up. "Speaking of which, I should get going. Meeting with Williams at 2, then I've got 3 showings scheduled after that. You can't just leave me out of major financial decisions. We're still married." I paused at the kitchen counter where I was grabbing my keys and wallet. "You're absolutely right. We are still married. For now. But here's the thing about decisions. When someone declares they want out of a partnership, they lose their vote on what happens next." Her mouth opened and closed like she was trying to catch flies. It was becoming a habit of hers. "Besides," I continued, "wouldn't want to embarrass you with my poor decision-making skills. Remember what you said about my judgment last month?" That hit home. I could see it in her eyes. The moment she realized that all those little cuts she'd been making over the years were about to come back and slice her in ways she never anticipated. My phone rang. It was my brother calling back after I'd left him a voicemail earlier. "Hey, yeah, it's happening," I said, answering the call right there in the kitchen. "Should be official within a few weeks if everything goes smoothly." I glanced at her. No, she's handling it about as well as you'd expect. Lots of shock and disbelief that actions have consequences. Her face went red. "Are you seriously discussing our personal business with your family?" I covered the phone. "Our personal business? I thought you said this marriage wasn't working." "That makes it former personal business." I went back to the call. "Yeah, I'll keep you posted. Thanks for the support." After I hung up, she just sat there staring at me like I'd transformed into someone she didn't recognize. Which, in a way, I had. 2 years of being told I was inadequate had finally ended, and apparently, she was meeting the real me for the first time. "Who are you right now?" she asked, and the question sounded genuinely bewildered. "I'm the guy you married before you decided he wasn't good enough. Turns out he was just sleeping under all that criticism you piled on him." I headed for the door. "Don't wait up. I'll probably grab dinner out after the house showings." The first showing was perfect. A craftsman-style house with character, good bones, and enough space for me to actually breathe. The real estate agent was a sharp woman in her 50s who clearly knew her business. "Divorce?" she asked matter-of-factly as we walked through the master bedroom. "That obvious? You've got that freedom tastes better than I remembered look. See it all the time." She opened the walk-in closet. "This one's got good energy for fresh starts." By the time I got home that evening, she'd apparently spent the day making phone calls of her own. I could tell because she had that frantic, slightly desperate energy that comes from getting advice you don't want to hear. "I talked to my sister," she announced as soon as I walked through the door. "Good for you. How's she doing?" "She thinks you're having some kind of midlife crisis." I laughed. Actually laughed out loud. A midlife crisis? That's what we're calling it when someone refuses to be treated like garbage anymore. You're not being treated like garbage. You're being dramatic. There it is again. Every time I point out something you've done, I'm being dramatic. Every time I have a reaction to your behavior, I'm overreacting. Do you see the pattern here? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Let me guess what else your sister said. She probably told you that all marriages go through rough patches, right? That I just need time to cool off? Maybe suggested you give me some space, and I'll come crawling back. The way her expression didn't change told me I'd hit the nail on the head. Here's the problem with that theory, I continued. It assumes I was acting out of emotion instead of logic. This isn't a rough patch. This isn't a phase. This is me finally accepting what you've been telling me for 2 years, that I'm not the husband you want. That's not true. Then why did you say the marriage wasn't working? Another one of those long pauses where she tried to find an answer that would put her back in control. Because I was frustrated. Because I felt like we weren't connecting anymore. And whose fault was that? Because I tried talking to you about it. Multiple times. Remember what you said? You're too sensitive. You take everything personally. Can't you just let things go? I shook my head. Well, congratulations. I'm finally letting it go. All of it. My phone buzzed with a text from the real estate agent. The sellers had accepted my offer on the Craftsman house. I smiled and typed back a quick acceptance. "What's that about?" she asked, trying to read over my shoulder. "Just bought a house. Close in 3 weeks." I pocketed the phone. "Guess I'll be out of your hair sooner than expected." The color drained from her face completely. "You bought a house? Without even discussing it with me. Why would I discuss it with you? You said the marriage isn't working. That means we're not a team anymore. Teams discuss major decisions. Divorced people make their own choices. We're not divorced yet. Details." I headed upstairs to start packing more of my things. The paperwork is just catching up to the reality. I could hear her on the phone again before I even reached the top of the stairs. Probably calling her sister back, or maybe her mother this time. Looking for someone to tell her that this was all just a big misunderstanding that could be fixed with the right approach. But here's what none of them understood. This wasn't about anger or hurt feelings or wounded pride. This was about finally accepting the truth she'd been showing me all along. She didn't respect me, didn't appreciate me, and honestly didn't seem to like me very much. The only difference was that now, instead of trying to change her mind, I was changing my address. 3 weeks later, I was standing in my new kitchen, unpacking the last box of dishes, when it hit me. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt this relaxed in my own space. No walking on eggshells, no bracing myself for the next criticism, no analyzing every word before I spoke. Just peace. The house had turned out even better than I'd hoped. The workshop in the garage was already set up with my old tools that had been gathering dust in storage, and I'd started a project building custom shelves for the living room. Turns out, when you're not constantly being told your hobbies are a waste of time, you actually enjoy doing them again. My routine had settled into something I actually looked forward to. Morning coffee on the back porch, reading the news without someone commenting on my choice of articles. Evenings in the workshop, classic rock playing as loud as I wanted. Weekends doing whatever struck my fancy without having to justify it to anyone. It was during one of those Saturday morning coffee sessions that my neighbor introduced herself. She was trimming roses in the yard next door when she looked over and waved. "You must be the new guy? I'm Helen. she called over the fence. That's me. How'd you guess? She laughed. The previous owner was 83 and hadn't used that workshop in about 15 years. I can hear the saw running again. It's nice. Sounds like the house is alive. We chatted for a few minutes about the neighborhood, local restaurants, that sort of thing. Normal, pleasant conversation without any underlying tension or hidden agendas. Revolutionary concept. My daughter's visiting next weekend, Helen mentioned as she gathered up her gardening tools. She's about your age, just moved back to town after finishing her residency. Maybe you'd like to join us for a barbecue? Always nice to meet the neighbors. I almost said no out of habit, then realized there was absolutely no reason to turn down a friendly invitation. That sounds great. Can I bring anything? Just yourself. Saturday around 6. That's how I met Sarah. No. Wait, I'm not using that name. Let me call her Dr. Morgan. Helen's daughter turned out to be a pediatrician with an easy laugh and the kind of confidence that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you want from life. What struck me most was how natural the conversation felt. As she asked about my woodworking, seemed genuinely interested when I described the shelving project, even offered some suggestions about organizing tools that actually made sense. When I mentioned I was recently divorced, she didn't get that awkward look people sometimes get, didn't start fishing for details or drama. Fresh starts can be liberating, she said simply, raising her beer bottle in a mock toast. Here's to figuring out what makes you happy. We talked for hours that night. About books, about travel, about her work with kids, and my work in project management. Real conversation where both people were actually listening instead of just waiting for their turn to talk. By the time I walked back to my house, I realized I'd laughed more in one evening than I had in the previous 6 months. She texted me the next day. Nothing dramatic or loaded with meaning. Just as simple. Thanks for the good conversation. Hope you get those shelves finished. I found myself looking forward to her messages. They were sporadic, never needy or demanding. Just the kind of casual communication between two adults who enjoyed each other's company. Sometimes she'd send a picture of something funny she'd seen at the hospital, or I'd share a photo of my latest project. Meanwhile, my phone had been buzzing regularly with calls and texts from my ex. I'd stopped answering most of them after the first week of the same circular conversations. She wanted to talk things through, wanted to try counseling, wanted me to give us another chance. The thing was, I didn't want another chance with her. I wanted the chance I was already taking, the one where I got to be myself without constant judgment. One evening, about a month after I'd moved out, she showed up at my new house unannounced. I was in the garage working on a coffee table when I heard the doorbell. Through the workshop window, I could see her standing on my front porch, looking nervous. I took my time walking to the door, partly because my hands were covered in wood stain and partly because I wasn't particularly eager for whatever conversation was about to happen. Nice place, she said when I opened the door, trying to peer past me into the house. Thanks. What do you need? Straight to the point. No small talk. No pretending this was a social visit. I wanted to see where you're living now. Wanted to talk. We've talked plenty. You said the marriage wasn't working. I agreed. End of story. But I've been thinking. That's a dangerous habit. I leaned against the doorframe, making it clear she wasn't being invited in. What conclusion did all this thinking lead you to? Maybe I was too hasty. Maybe we gave up too easily. I don't remember giving up on anything. I remember agreeing with your assessment and taking action accordingly. She shifted from foot to foot, clearly uncomfortable with my matter-of-fact tone. Don't you miss what we had? What we had? You mean the constant criticism? The eye-rolling? The way you made me feel like everything I did was wrong. I shook my head. No, I don't miss that at all. We had good times too. Did we? Because honestly, I'm having trouble remembering them. Maybe that should tell you something about the quality of those good times. Her face went through that familiar cycle of emotions, surprise, hurt, anger, then back to manipulation mode. You're different, she said, like it was an accusation. You're right. I'm happier. I'm more relaxed. I actually enjoy my own company again. Funny how that works when you're not constantly being told you're inadequate. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text. I glanced at it automatically, a message from Dr. Morgan about a new restaurant she'd tried, wondering if I'd like to check it out sometime. Who's that? My ex asked, and there was something sharp in her voice. A friend. What kind of friend? The kind that treats me like an adult instead of a disappointment. I put my phone back in my pocket. Look, I appreciate you stopping by, but I've got plans tonight. Plans with this friend. Plans that don't involve rehashing a relationship that you already declared wasn't working. I stepped back and started closing the door. Drive safe. I didn't wait to see her reaction. I had a coffee table to finish and a text message to respond to. The coffee table would be beautiful when it was done, and the text message was from someone who actually enjoyed talking to me. For the first time in years, I had better things to do than analyze what I'd done wrong in a conversation with someone who'd already decided I wasn't worth the effort. 2 weeks after her unannounced visit, the phone calls started coming from mutual friends. First, it was Tom from our old neighborhood, calling with what he probably thought was subtle curiosity. "Hey man, just checking in. Heard you and the wife are having some issues." "No issues," I replied while sanding down the dining table I was refinishing. We had different ideas about whether our marriage was working. Turns out we were both right. "But she's telling everyone you just up and left without warning. Said you're going through some kind of breakdown." I stopped sanding. "A breakdown? That's interesting. What else is she saying?" "Well," Tom sounded uncomfortable now. "She mentioned you're not thinking clearly, maybe drinking too much, making impulsive decisions. She's worried about you." The picture became clearer with each call. My ex had apparently launched a full campaign to rewrite the narrative. According to her version of events, I was the unstable one having a crisis, while she was the concerned wife trying to save our marriage from my self-destructive behavior. When my college buddy Jake called with a similar story, I decided to set the record straight. "Jake, let me ask you something. In all the times we've hung out over the past couple years, how many times did she criticize something I said or did in front of you?" There was a long pause. I mean, she had opinions about things. How many times did she roll her eyes when I was talking? How many times did she correct me or make little comments about my choices? Another pause, longer this time. "Okay, yeah, she could be pretty harsh sometimes. So when she tells you I'm having a breakdown because I finally stopped accepting that treatment, does that sound like someone who's lost his mind or someone who's found his backbone?" The call stopped coming after that. Word travels fast in small social circles, and apparently my side of the story made more sense to people who'd actually witnessed our interactions over the years. But she wasn't done. The next phase of her campaign was more direct. I was having lunch with Dr. Morgan at a local cafe when my phone started buzzing with texts, then buzzing some more. By the time I checked it, there were 17 messages waiting, all from my ex. "Everything okay?" Dr. Morgan asked, noticing my expression as I scrolled through them. The messages started reasonable enough. "We need to talk about dividing up the wedding gifts." But they quickly devolved into emotional manipulation. "I can't believe you're throwing away 8 years like they meant nothing." And eventually landed in full desperation territory. "I know you're seeing someone. How could you move on so fast?" "My ex-wife is having what you might call a moment of clarity," I said, showing Dr. Morgan the screen. She glanced at the messages and winced. "Yikes, that's a lot of emotional dumping for a Tuesday afternoon." Want to know the funny part? She's the one who said the marriage wasn't working. But apparently when I agreed with her, that wasn't part of her plan. Dr. Morgan took a sip of her coffee and gave me a thoughtful look. "Some people like to create problems they can then solve dramatically. Makes them feel important. When you solve the problem quietly and efficiently, you took away her starring role in the drama." That night, the texts escalated. She'd apparently driven by my house and seen Dr. Morgan's car in the driveway when we were having dinner and working on a puzzle together. The messages went from accusatory to outright hostile. "I can't believe you're already sleeping with someone else. 8 years of marriage and you replace me in a month. What's her name? Do I know her? This explains everything. You probably planned this whole thing." I turned my phone off and focused on the puzzle. Dr. Morgan had brought over a 1,000-piece landscape that was proving to be the perfect kind of challenging. We worked on it in comfortable silence, occasionally commenting on a particularly tricky section or celebrating when we found a piece that had been eluding us. "This is nice," she said as we sorted edge pieces. "Peaceful." "Yeah, it is." I found a corner piece and clicked it into place. I'd forgotten what it felt like to spend time with someone who actually enjoys my company. "Her loss," Dr. Morgan said simply, and went back to sorting colors. The next morning brought a new development. My ex had apparently scheduled an appointment with a therapist and wanted me to know about it. "I'm getting help," she texted. "Dr. Peterson says couples therapy could save our marriage if we're both willing to put in the work." I texted back, "Good for you. Personal growth is always positive. Will you come with me?" "No." "Why not?" Because we're getting divorced. Divorced people don't need couples therapy. But if we could work things out. We did work things out. You said the marriage wasn't working. I agreed and took action to solve the problem. Problem solved. That's not what I meant, and you know it. Then you should have been more careful with your words. Words have consequences. What she didn't know was that I'd already heard about Dr. Peterson from a different source. My lawyer had mentioned that several of his clients' exes had tried the "I'm in therapy now" approach as a last-ditch effort to delay divorce proceedings or gain sympathy in court. It's actually pretty common, Williams had told me. They think a few therapy sessions will prove they're committed to change. Usually lasts about as long as it takes to realize the therapist isn't just going to validate their victim narrative. Sure enough, 3 weeks later, the therapy references stopped appearing in her messages. Instead, she moved on to phase 3 of her campaign, showing up places she knew I'd be. The first time was at the hardware store on a Saturday morning. I was picking up some supplies for a new project when I spotted her in the garden center, clearly not shopping for anything, just positioned where she could accidentally run into me. I grabbed what I needed and headed for the checkout, but she intercepted me near the paint display. "Fancy meeting you here," she said with forced casualness. "Not really. I shop here every Saturday. You know that. I was just picking up some things for the yard." She gestured vaguely toward the garden center, where I could see she didn't have a cart or basket. "Good luck with that," I said and continued toward the register. "Wait." She followed me. "Can we just talk for a minute? Like adults." I stopped and turned to face her. "We are talking. Like adults. Adults who are getting divorced because one of them declared the marriage wasn't working." I was having a bad day when I said that. I didn't mean it. "Which part didn't you mean? The part where you said it? Or the part where you've spent 2 years showing me exactly how much you meant it through your actions?" She didn't have an answer for that, which was becoming a theme in our conversations. The second accidental encounter was at the restaurant where Dr. Morgan and I had started meeting for our weekly dinners. She was sitting at the bar, nursing a glass of wine, when we walked in. "This is awkward," Dr. Morgan murmured as we waited to be seated. "Only if we make it awkward," I replied. "She's allowed to be here. So are we." But throughout dinner, I could feel her watching us. Every laugh, every casual touch, every moment of genuine connection was being cataloged and analyzed. When we left, she followed us out to the parking lot. "So this is her," she said, approaching Dr. Morgan's car. "This is Dr. Morgan, yes. Dr. Morgan, this is my ex-wife." Dr. Morgan extended her hand politely. "Nice to meet you." My ex ignored the gesture. "How long has this been going on?" "Our relationship started after I moved out," I said before Dr. Morgan could respond. "Not that it's your business. 8 years of marriage, and you're already parading around with someone new." "I'm not parading anywhere. I'm having dinner with someone who treats me with respect. You should try it sometime." The look on her face told me that hit harder than I'd intended, but I wasn't feeling particularly apologetic about it. Later that night, Dr. Morgan and I were sitting on my back porch, sharing a bottle of wine and talking about everything and nothing, when she brought up the encounter. "She's not going to make this easy, is she?" "Probably not. But here's the thing, it doesn't matter what she does. The decision is already made. The papers are already filed. She can make it dramatic or she can make it simple, but she can't make it not happen. And you're okay with that?" No second thoughts. I looked at this amazing woman sitting next to me, someone who'd brought laughter and peace back into my life, someone who made me feel like the best version of myself, and shook my head. No second thoughts. Only gratitude that I finally stopped settling for less than I deserved. The divorce mediation session was scheduled for a Thursday morning. Williams had prepared me for what to expect, but nothing could have prepared me for the show my ex decided to put on. She arrived 15 minutes late, eyes red-rimmed like she'd been crying, clutching a tissue box like a prop. Her attorney, a sharp-dressed woman who looked like she'd handled plenty of dramatic clients, seemed less impressed with the performance than my ex had hoped. "Sorry I'm late," she sniffled. "This is just so hard for me." I sat quietly while she launched into what sounded like a rehearsed speech about how I'd abandoned our marriage without warning, how she was devastated by my sudden change in personality, and how she just wanted her husband back. When she finished, the mediator looked at me expectantly. "Do you have a response to any of that?" I pulled out my phone and opened the voice memo app. "Actually, I do. I've been recording our conversations since she started showing up places uninvited. Figured it might be relevant." The color drained from her face. I played a 30-second clip from our hardware store encounter where she clearly admitted she didn't mean what she'd said about the marriage not working, that it was just manipulation tactics. Then I played another clip from the restaurant parking lot where she'd made several accusations about my character that contradicted everything she'd just told the mediator. These recordings span the last month, I said calmly. They show a pattern of attempting to control the narrative through emotional manipulation rather than genuine concern for our relationship. Her attorney leaned over and whispered something to her. My ex's face went from pale to bright red. He's recording me without permission, she protested. Williams cleared his throat. Actually, this state has one-party consent laws. The recordings are perfectly legal. The mediator made notes while listening to 2 more clips where my ex contradicted her own story about why our marriage had problems. Is there anything else you'd like to add? The mediator asked me. Just this. She said our marriage wasn't working. I agreed. Everything that's happened since then has been my response to her accurate assessment of our relationship. The fact that she's surprised by the consequences doesn't change the validity of her original statement. The property division went smoothly after that. No dramatic objections, no attempts to claim emotional distress. Just a quiet, businesslike division of assets between 2 adults who were clearly better apart than together. As we left the building, she cornered me in the parking lot one last time. Those recordings were a low blow, she said. Those recordings were evidence. There's a difference. I unlocked my car door. You wanted to paint me as unstable and manipulative. I just let people hear what our actual conversations sounded like. I never called you unstable. You told Tom I was having a breakdown. You told Jake I was drinking too much and making impulsive decisions. Should I play those recordings too? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Even she couldn't argue with her own words. This isn't how I wanted things to end, she said quietly. No, you wanted them to end with me begging you to reconsider while you held all the power. But here's what you never understood. I wasn't the desperate one in this relationship. I was just the accommodating one. When I stopped accommodating, you lost your audience. That evening, Dr. Morgan came over to help me celebrate the successful mediation with takeout from our favorite Thai place. How do you feel? She asked as we sorted through containers of pad Thai and green curry. Relieved. Free. Like I can finally stop looking over my shoulder waiting for the next dramatic confrontation. I opened a beer and took a long sip. She spent so much energy trying to prove I was making a mistake that she never stopped to consider whether she actually wanted me back or just wanted to win. And now she gets to figure out what she actually wants instead of just reacting to what I'm doing. I raised my beer bottle, and I get to keep building something real with someone who actually enjoys my company. Dr. Morgan clinked her bottle against mine. To people who say what they mean and mean what they say, and to people who listen when they hear it. The final divorce papers were signed 2 weeks later. No drama, no last-minute pleas, no surprise appearances. Just signatures on legal documents that made official what had been emotionally true for months. My ex had apparently moved on to other pursuits. Helen mentioned seeing her at a local singles meetup, looking determined to find someone new to fix. Some people never learn, Helen had said while watering her roses. Not my problem anymore, I'd replied, and meant it completely. The best part was how normal my life had become. Normal in the best possible way. Predictable, peaceful, and filled with people who added value instead of drama. Dr. Morgan had started leaving a few things at my house. A coffee mug, a favorite sweater, some books on the nightstand. Small signs of a life being built together instead of torn apart. Is this okay? She'd asked when she noticed her things mixing in with mine. More than okay. It feels right. And it did. Everything about this new life felt right in a way that my old life never had, even in its best moments. Turns out, when someone tells you they don't think your relationship is working, the smartest thing you can do is listen. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I was installing crown molding in my dining room when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see my ex-wife standing on the porch, but this time she looked different. Less desperate, more composed. Almost like the person I'd married years ago. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. You look good, she said, and for once it didn't sound like manipulation. Thanks. How are you doing? Better, actually. I've been seeing Dr. Peterson regularly. Real therapy this time. Not just ammunition for getting you back. She managed a weak smile. I wanted to apologize. I leaned against the doorframe, curious where this was going. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how I treated you, about the things I said and did. She took a breath. You were right. I was critical and dismissive. I made you feel small because it made me feel bigger. Okay, I appreciate you saying that. The thing is, I didn't realize how good I had it. How good you were to me, even when I wasn't good to you. Her voice cracked slightly. Dr. Peterson helped me understand that when I said the marriage wasn't working, what I really meant was that I wasn't happy with myself, and I was taking it out on you. I stayed quiet, letting her finish. I know it's too late now. I know you've moved on, and honestly, I can see why. But I wanted you to know that I understand what I lost. She wiped her eyes. I lost someone who loved me even when I didn't deserve it. You're right, I said simply. It is too late. She nodded, tears flowing freely now. I know. Is there any chance we could try again? I'm different now. I'm working on myself. I understand what I did wrong. I looked at this woman who had once been the center of my world, who had slowly chipped away at my self-worth until I'd forgotten who I was without her criticism. Now she wanted another chance to prove she'd changed. Here's the problem with that idea, I said calmly. You didn't have a moment of doubt about our marriage. You had years of showing me exactly how you felt about me. You didn't accidentally say those words. They came from somewhere real. But people can change. Maybe they can. But I'm not interested in finding out. You had 8 years to appreciate what you had. You chose to spend those years tearing it down instead. I straightened up. I'm happy now. Genuinely happy with someone who chose to build me up from day one. Is it serious? With her. Serious enough that I don't spend my time wondering if she's going to respect me today or find fault with everything I do. I smiled, thinking about Dr. Morgan. Serious enough that I remember what it feels like to be someone's first choice instead of their project. Her face crumpled. I was scared. I was scared of being happy because I thought if I found fault with everything, I couldn't be disappointed when it ended. So you ended it yourself? Self-fulfilling prophecy. I realize that now. Good. That's growth. Take it into your next relationship and don't make the same mistakes. I started to close the door, then paused. And stop telling people you had a moment of doubt. On what actually happened. You spent years deciding our marriage wasn't working, then you finally said it out loud. The only moment involved was when you realized I was listening. I closed the door and went back to my crown molding. Through the window, I could see her sitting in her car for a long time before finally driving away. That evening, Dr. Morgan and I were cooking dinner together when I told her about the visit. How do you feel about it? She asked while chopping vegetables for our salad. Sad for her, mostly. She figured out what she'd lost after it was too late to matter. I stirred the pasta sauce. But grateful too. Grateful that I didn't waste more years trying to convince someone to appreciate me. That I found someone who actually wants to be with me instead of just staying out of habit or fear. She set down her knife and walked over to kiss me. For the record, I don't just want to be with you. I choose to be with you every single day. Same here. Later that night, as we sat on the back porch sharing a bottle of wine and watching the sunset, my phone buzzed with one final text from my ex. Thank you for listening to me today. I hope you're happy. You deserve to be. I showed the message to Dr. Morgan. That's actually really mature of her, she said. Yeah, it is. About 6 months too late, but still. I deleted the message and put my phone away. You know what the funny part is? If she'd figured this stuff out while we were married, we might have actually worked. Do you regret that it didn't happen that way? I looked at this incredible woman beside me, thought about the life we were building together, the respect and joy that filled our days, and shook my head. Not for a second. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is someone telling you exactly how they feel about your relationship. Saves everyone a lot of time. Dr. Morgan raised her wine glass. To moments of clarity. And to people who listen when they hear them. 6 months later, Dr. Morgan and I got engaged. Not because we were trying to prove anything or fill a void, but because we'd found something worth building together. My ex heard about it through the neighborhood grapevine. She sent a card. Nothing dramatic, just congratulations. I'm glad you found happiness. I appreciated the gesture, but I didn't need her approval anymore. I'd learned the most valuable lesson of my adult life. When someone shows you who they are and how they feel about you, believe them the first time. And when someone shows you that they value, respect, and genuinely enjoy your company, believe that too. The difference between those two things is everything.
Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.